So it turns out that Gimli lied to us. Not only do people toss dwarves, but if you're a barbarian, it is a grand tactical opportunity. Today, we're going to discuss the Advanced Player's Guide for Pathfinder 2nd Edition on this episode of the Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Mark and I am the Local Disaster Tour Guide. That's right, I'm a storyteller who sees absolutely no potential problems with introducing sovereign glue into my party's treasure in the next session. Welcome to my channel where we talk about role-playing games like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Now before we get into the video proper today, I do want to take a moment and share something with you all. I am very excited to share this. Recently, the RPG Superstar competition returned. This was a series of competitions that Paizo did several years ago. I think it originally ran from like 2007 to 2015. And this year, the RPG Superstar competition came back and is being hosted by Roll for Combat. And I am one of the top 101 finalists for RPG Superstar 2020. I am really excited. I tried that competition many times in the past, and this is the first year where I've actually made it this far in the competition, so I'm just kind of on top of the world. Right now, RPG Superstar is giving the internet the opportunity to vote on all 101 finalists that have been selected for this competition. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to throw a link down in the description where you can go over to RPG Superstar and you can look at the finalists and you can vote on your favorite entry in that competition. Now, unfortunately, I'm lawful good, so I have to encourage you, please go look at the entries and vote for the entry that you think is the best. I'm very proud of the work that I've done. I'm glad I made it this far, but I don't want to just shamelessly say, hey people, go vote for me. I'm sure there are a lot of people who have done great work, so I just want to encourage you, go check out the finalists and vote for your favorite. However, I will at least try to sell you on my entry. My entry for RPG Superstar is a creature I call the Salt Stalker. This was a creature I originally developed for a Starfinder game a few years ago. It is a creature that looks like a grotesque hybrid between a greyhound and a lizard. The creature excretes a terrible salty bile that forms into rigid spines all over its bodies. These spines are relatively frail and can snap off easily, but if you are injured by the spines, you are hit with a terrible desiccating poison that causes you to become severely dehydrated. These creatures are known to stalk desert oases, ruining water supplies and attacking any creature that is desperately seeking something to drink. So I hope I've at least piqued your curiosity about my creation, but definitely head on over to RPG Superstar, check out the various entries, and vote for your favorite. Thank you for your support and wish me luck. I am super excited that I have made it so far into this competition. But on to today's video. Today we are doing another video in the Local Disaster Tour Guide Review series, and we're going to be talking about the Advanced Player's Guide for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So, this is a very hyped book for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. There's just been a lot of conversation from Paizo and from the gaming community about this product. And this released just a little over a month ago. My copy came to me a little bit late, so I'm sorry for the delayed review. But Paizo itself has said that they consider Pathfinder 2nd Edition to be a game with 4 legs that it stands on. The core rulebook, the bestiaries, the Game Mastery Guide, and this book, the Advanced Player's Guide. So today, we're going to take a look at the Advanced Player's Guide And I'm going to give you my thoughts on whether or not this truly is a core product and whether or not it truly stands up to the hype that Paizo has built around it. As a quick history lesson, the Advanced Player's Guide in Pathfinder 1st Edition was commonly considered one of the most important products in that game. In the history of Pathfinder 1st Edition, the core rulebook was definitely a standout. Paizo breaking away from Wizards of the Coast and taking the D&D 3.5 rules and running with them and doing their own thing. It was an interesting and dramatic moment in the gaming community. But for a lot of people who played Pathfinder 1st Edition, and I would probably count myself in this boat, the Advanced Player's Guide was the moment that Pathfinder 1st Edition really found its feet and started running on its own merits. This book did a lot to expand the strength of Pathfinder 1st Edition, and its legacy in that game probably influences how heavily pushed Paizo has made the Advanced Player's Guide for 2nd Edition. Now, a couple quick things I feel I should say. First off, this is not a paid or sponsored review by any means. I purchased the Advanced Player's Guide of my own free will. It was something I was interested in getting, and it's something that I just want to talk about because I enjoy role-playing games and I enjoy Pathfinder 2nd Edition. No one is paying me to do this review. These are just my own thoughts that I am willingly putting out there. And then the second thing that I want to say is something that I commonly say on my review videos. Please remember, I am just some random guy on the internet. My opinion is just that, it's an opinion. On top of that, I've openly admitted I'm a little bit of a Paizo fanboy. I really like Paizo as a company. I really like a lot of the products that they put out there. And I did buy the special leather covered edition, so there is a possibility that my thoughts are biased. As such, I always encourage you, check out the product for yourself before making a purchase decision. I hope that my thoughts will be beneficial to you if you're considering buying this product, but there will never be a better review than checking something out for yourself. So take that grain of salt and understand these thoughts are my own, but they are just an opinion. I always encourage you, check the book out for yourself before deciding if this is something that you might be interested in. So, let's get started. If you've seen any of my other review videos, you know that I like to begin at the end. I want to give you my final thoughts on the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Advanced Player's Guide, and then we will work through the book and talk about its contents so you can help understand how I arrived at that conclusion. But before I can give you my final grade, there's a question that needs to be answered because Paizo asked this question. Paizo, if you're watching this review video, I'm sorry that I have to answer this question, but you put it out there. Paizo made that statement. Pathfinder 2nd Edition is a game that stands on 4 legs. The core rulebook, the bestiary, the game mastery guide, and now the Advanced Player's Guide. So, do you need the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Advanced Player's Guide to properly play this game? Strictly speaking, the answer to that question is no. I have played Pathfinder 2nd Edition for a while now. I have run numerous games of Pathfinder 2nd Edition without the Advanced Player's Guide, and I've had a lot of fun, and the games have gone well. You don't need the Advanced Player's Guide to play this game. But that being said, man, oh man, do I suggest this book if you are interested in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This is a fantastic product, and I will go ahead and tell you my overall grade for Pathfinder 2nd Edition's Advanced Player's Guide is an A. I was honestly tempted to give this book an A+, but there are just a few nitpicks that kept it out of the A+ category for me, but this is a very, very solid book. I was trying to think of a way to explain how the Advanced Player's Guide would relate to the core rules for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I think the best analogy that I can come up with is a Jeep that my father built back when I was a teenager. My dad was an auto mechanic, and he loved building cars and working on cars. He did that for years. And I remember when I was young and in my early teenage years, Dad started a project that became the envy of the neighborhood. He built a Jeep literally from the frame up. He got all of the parts, he got all of the pieces, he knew what he wanted, he knew how he wanted it to work, and he spent a couple of years literally building his own car piece by piece by piece. And I remember about a year and a half into that project, he had gotten all of the mechanical components to the Jeep working. I remember one day going over to the garage where he had the Jeep stored, and he backed the frame of the Jeep and the engine and all of the other mechanical parts that made that beast run. He backed it out of the garage, and I remember we actually took this Jeep frame out for a ride, and it was fun. It was, that thing was a beast. It was powerful, and it was a lot of fun to ride in. My dad had a functioning vehicle, even though the body of the vehicle wasn't there yet. It was still going to be a while before he got the pieces necessary to assemble the body of the Jeep, but as you can imagine, when the body came in, that thing was beautiful, and it was the envy of the neighborhood. That Jeep had its own unique sound. You could hear it coming from a few miles away. It was just an incredible vehicle. Everybody loved it. My dad was so proud of it. And the best analogy I have for the Advanced Player's Guide is that moment when Dad put the body around that functioning framework for a Jeep. The reality is, Pathfinder 2nd Edition's core rulebook is a complete and functioning game. You can take it out for a ride, and it works well, you can have a lot of fun with it. But the Advanced Player's Guide, it's like Paizo came in and just strapped the right pieces onto that framework to take a fun ride and make it something beautiful. The Pathfinder 2nd Edition Advanced Player's Guide really shows you what this game is capable of. Paizo took the time to give us an incredible framework, and now they are building on that framework in a way that is very engaging. It's a lot of fun, and I think it brings a lot of quality to this game. Now, before I get into my chapter-by-chapter breakdown, so you can know my thoughts on the individual components, there is something I have started to challenge myself to do when I am reviewing these different products for role-playing games. In the past, I have kind of glanced over and overlooked the artwork, even though I know that the artwork is an integral part of the success of these products. So I am challenging myself to take the time to point out pieces of art that I really love from these different role-playing products I review. And I have to say, in the Advanced Player's Guide, the Tengu Oracle iconic character really gets some fantastic artwork in this book. There is a piece of artwork where the Tengu Oracle is battling a couple of hellhounds, and then later in the spells chapter, the Tengu Oracle appears to be interacting with a rune wall of some kind, and both of those pieces of artwork are fantastic. The other iconics in this book really should be jealous of just how amazing the artwork for the Tengu Oracle is. Both of those pieces are standout and my personal favorites. Doesn't really affect the value of the book, but I do want to give credit where credit is due. The artist behind those pieces is fantastic. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go chapter by chapter through the Advanced Player's Guide, and I'm going to talk about what is available in each chapter. I'm going to give a grade to each chapter, and I can't cover every single item in each chapter, but I am going to pick out some of my favorites from each category we discuss to give you a little bit of a taste of what is available in this book. So for Chapter 1 in the Advanced Player's Guide, we have the Ancestries and Backgrounds chapter. And in keeping with the title of the chapter, this basically deals with the first two steps of character creation in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, your ancestry and your background. This chapter includes 5 new ancestries, 5 versatile heritages, we'll get into that in a moment, new options for the existing ancestries from the core rulebook, and finally a collection of new backgrounds, including some rare backgrounds. So overall, I'm going to give this chapter an A-. There's a lot of good information in this chapter, and I really enjoy a lot of the new options that Paizo presents with the new ancestries, the new versatile heritages, and the new backgrounds. But there are some portions of this chapter that really feel asymmetrical, I guess is the best term. Basically, Paizo gives us a lot of good options here, but it feels like some of the options are not quite as developed as some of the other options in this section, and it's a little bit disappointing when you see 17th level ancestry feats for most of the ancestries, but then the kobold and the rat folk, their ancestry feats only go up to 13th level. That asymmetry does steal a little bit from the quality of this chapter, but still, overall, this is going to bring a lot to the gaming table, and there are a lot of positive things to talk about here. First up, 5 new ancestries that are introduced in the Advanced Player's Guide. The catfolk, the kobold, the orc, the ratfolk, and the tengu. Now let me just say, my favorite of these 5 new ancestries is probably the orc, but that is mostly a reflection of the fact that orc really felt like it was missing from this game. With a lot of fantasy role-playing games, I have long disliked the idea of having half-orc as an option and just leaving orc completely off the table. I don't like the fact that most fantasy role-playing games do that. You can play a half-orc, you can have some orc in your character, but we're not going to go full orc. So the fact that Paizo has brought the orc in as a playable ancestry for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, that's just something that needed to be done. So I'm very grateful that they took the time to do that with this book. The catfolk, the kobold, the ratfolk, and the tengu are nice options. The tengu especially, there's a lot of things I'm wanting to play around with that ancestry, but the orc felt needed, and now it's here. So I have to say the orc is my favorite inclusion from the new ancestries. I will say there is one slightly curious thing that I have noticed with Paizo and the ancestries that they're publishing. They slide the lore for the ancestries in sideways sometimes. Paizo has taken the time to develop ancestry lore for the different ancestries in their setting, but they don't always present it forefront with the ancestry, and one of the most obvious ways this happens is the ancestries don't use their own proper names. Paizo has developed lore for how catfolk and ratfolk refer to themselves. Catfolk refer to themselves as Amorans. Ratfolk refer to themselves as Isoki. But in the book, their ancestry chapter is catfolk and ratfolk. They did the same thing with lizard folk in the Lost Omens series. The lizard folk refer to themselves as the Uruxi, but when you look at their entry, it just says lizard folk. I don't understand why you wouldn't present that information. On top of the ancestry, put Amorans, and then maybe put catfolk in parentheses so people know what to expect. I don't know why you would hide that cultural information about the ancestry further down in the entry. It's a weird thing, it's a minor nitpick, but it does stand out because Paizo has now done this with 2 different products. And the weird thing is, they don't do it with Starfinder. In Starfinder, the Isoki are a core race in the game, And they're not called rat folk, they're called Isoki. So clearly in other products, you have put that cultural information at the forefront, but you hold it back here. It's just a strange thing, but it does stand out a little bit in this chapter, so I do need to note it. Overall, I do feel like all of these ancestries are interesting and engaging. The kobold ancestry leans very heavily into the we wish we were dragons lore of kobolds. So depending on how much you enjoy that aspect of kobolds, it may affect how much you enjoy kobolds in this book, but they definitely drove that point home for the kobolds. I feel like the other ancestries are a little more versatile and offer a little more variety. And I will say I love the storyline of the orcs as it is currently playing out in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The Golarion setting and the way that they are managing the orc homeland is very intriguing to me. I like where that story is going. So I both enjoy orcs now as a playable option, and also I enjoy several of the storylines that they have made available for orc characters. So orc is definitely my favorite inclusion here, and I feel like they gave us a lot of solid options. But, in my opinion, the shining star of this entire chapter is not the new ancestries, it's the new versatile heritages that have been added to this book. When you're building your character in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you pick your ancestry, and then under your ancestry you have a sub-choice called your heritage. So if you're a human, you could play a skilled heritage human, and that has particular mechanical implications for the game. Well, in the core rulebook, Paizo, how should I best say this, dipped their toe into the water of trying something new with half-elves and half-orcs. Half-elves and half-orcs were no longer their own distinct ancestry. Rather, they were a heritage for the human ancestry. So if you wanted to play a half-elf, you would choose human as your ancestry, and when it came to heritage, you would choose half-elf for your heritage. And then, in a tiny little sidebar, down at the bottom of the page, Paizo included a note where they said, at the GM's discretion, you could possibly use half-elf or half-orc as a heritage for other ancestries in the game. So, for example, you could play a halfling with the half-elf heritage. Now, for years, this has kind of been a question that I've had. Why are all of the half-elves and why are all of the half-orcs also half-human? Why are there no other combinations? Why couldn't you have, for example, an elfling? Well, Paizo apparently was asking the same question, and so they threw that tiny little sidebar into the core rulebook and said, you know, here's something that you might be interested in doing, and if your game master's okay with it, it's something that you can try. And I honestly think what Paizo was doing is they were testing the waters for what would become the versatile heritage. They wanted to know if their fan base was interested in a heritage that could be applied to any ancestry out there. And when Paizo dipped their toes in that water, this is how the fan base responded. Yeah, I think we all wanted this to happen. I think this is a question every gamer has struggled with, and I am so happy that Paizo has introduced this concept into their game. The versatile heritage, there are now heritages that can be applied to any ancestry. In this book, we are given 5 of them. We are given the Changeling, the Dampire, and 3 planar scions, the Azamar, the Tiefling, and the Duskwalker. The Changeling represents a character who has a hag in their lineage somewhere, and that hag blood in their system is beginning to manifest in different ways, And depending on the type of hag that is in your character's family tree, it can actually affect which ancestry feats are available to you. By the same token, a vampire represents someone whose bloodline has been influenced in some fashion by a vampire. And yes, they have options for different types of vampires that might have influenced your character. Finally, you have the planar scions, which represent characters who have been influenced by the energy of different planes. The two most classic are the Aasimar and the Tiefling, or the angel and demon-blooded characters. We've seen Aasimars and Tieflings many times in the past in a lot of different settings and games, so these are concepts that we kind of knew were going to be coming. But then we were also given the Duskwalker. And of all of the versatile heritages in this book, the Duskwalker is hands down my favorite. This is a character that has been influenced by the magic of the Boneyard. Pharasma, the Lady of Graves, and her psychopomp servants have sent you back from the lands of the dead for one reason or another. I love this. This opens up so many interesting story opportunities. It has been a long-standing trope of the fantasy genre to have the character who has come back from the dead for one reason or another, and this is the perfect way to portray that particular character concept. The Duskwalker versatile heritage is Paizo, you knocked it out of the park with the Duskwalker. I absolutely love this. Thank you so much for including this as an option in the game. You have added a ton of variety to the characters that people can portray. If I have a little bit of a nitpick for the versatile heritage section, I love this section, don't get me wrong. There is one thing that bothers me a little bit. For the planar scions, you have Aasimars and Tieflings representing good and evil planes respectively, but you didn't include the planar scions being influenced by lawful and chaotic planes. I believe in your lore the Aphorites and the Gonzi, if I remember correctly. I wish you would have gone ahead and included the lawful and chaotic planar scions as well, because it would have felt like you properly fleshed out the planar scion as an option for this game. Those are definitely options that feel like they are missing from this book, but in all other regards, the versatile heritage section is amazing. The last thing we need to talk about in this chapter are the backgrounds, and truthfully in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, backgrounds are kind of a dime a dozen. There are hundreds of backgrounds out there. I might be exaggerating slightly, but probably not by a lot. There are all kinds of backgrounds out there, and if you can't find a background that fits your concept, inventing a background is really straightforward. Backgrounds are not hard to do. So, color me pleasantly surprised when Paizo brought rare backgrounds to the table. This book has 8 new rare backgrounds, including the Haunted and Royalty rare backgrounds. Now, a rare background basically comes with a caveat. You have to have the Game Master's permission to use these options, but if you want these highly specialized backgrounds, here are the rules that will let you do it. And let me just say, I love what Paizo did here. They found a way to offer rare backgrounds as an option without making them feel mechanically unbalanced. To be honest, I was very worried when they announced rare backgrounds because I was afraid it was going to create a situation where players were going to feel compelled, oh, I have to take this rare background because it is mechanically superior to any other option in the game. They didn't do that. They found a way to make them mechanically varied while still making them feel balanced with the regular backgrounds that characters might use or select. To give you an example, the rare background Feybound offers a unique free action that a player can take in place of some of the normal background abilities that you might get. It's flavorful, it's interesting, it's fun, but it's also mechanically balanced. And I really, really like that about the rare backgrounds that Paizo has produced here. They've given us some good options, but more importantly, they've given us a model that says this is how you can play with the background system to really create unique and interesting characters. So the rare backgrounds are a standout option in this book, and I am deeply grateful that Paizo has brought this to the table. Overall, the first chapter of the Advanced Player's Guide is very strong. You've got 5 new ancestries, 5 wonderful new versatile heritages, you've got a collection of new backgrounds, and you've got some amazing rare backgrounds all being presented. This is a good chapter, it's very solid. I just have to knock a little bit off in my evaluation because, as I've said, some of the ancestries don't feel as fleshed out as some of the other ancestries in the same book. I realize as the Pathfinder 2nd Edition line grows that some of those gaps will probably be filled down the road, but it feels a little sloppy here. So overall, I give this chapter an A-. There's a lot of good options here, and I think that players and DMs alike are really going to enjoy this chapter. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Chapter 2, which is the Classes chapter. And I hope you'll forgive me for holding my notes up here, but there is a lot of stuff to talk about here. So while I'm going through the list of what is in this chapter, I'm going to keep my notes close by for handy reference. And then I'll set my notes down and we'll actually talk about this stuff. I will say the Classes chapter in the Advanced Player's Guide is probably the meatiest chapter and is probably the main chapter that you are interested in. It seems like most of the conversations that I've had about this book and most of the conversations that I've seen about this book have really centered around the Classes chapter. And if you are intrigued by the Advanced Player's Guide, it stands to reason some of the material in this chapter is probably what's drawing your interest. The biggest items in this chapter definitely are the 4 new classes that Paizo has brought to the game. We have the Investigator, the Oracle, the Swashbuckler, and the Witch as new options for class when you are rolling up a character for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, one thing to note about these classes is Paizo has specifically stated these are advanced classes. They are intended to be slightly more complex than the classes that are found in the core rulebook, and I would definitely say that that is true. The Investigator class is a skill-based class that focuses in on, well, investigations. You focus in on a clue or a suspect, and you get bonuses to trying to resolve whatever mystery surrounds that particular situation. In combat, you rely on the Devise a Stratagem activity, which allows you to come up with a plan for battle, kind of a la the Sherlock Holmes movies, that you intend to deploy versus your foes. Next up, you have the Oracle, which is a divine spellcaster without necessarily a deity. You have, in one fashion or another, gained access to divine magic. You have unlocked the mysteries of the universe without someone there to guide you. And needless to say, the consequences of those actions can be a little problematic. The Oracle class comes with certain divine mysteries that influence your class features, but that divine mystery also comes with a curse, a penalty that is inflicted upon you for dabbling in magic that you are not truly prepared to comprehend. The fun thing about the curse mechanic is, as you use your magic more and more, the curse grows stronger and stronger, and it creates this fun dynamic of you have powerful options at your disposal, but push too far and your curse may overwhelm you. I really enjoy that about the Oracle class. The Swashbuckler is exactly what you think it would be. A light-armored, dexterous, and witty foe who engages in all sorts of high-flying shenanigans and is busy tumbling all over the battlefield and making dramatic remarks as they slice up their enemy. It's a classic stereotype in role-playing games, and it's good to see it back here. The Swashbuckler class focuses on a mechanic called panache. And panache is an on or off mechanic. You have it, or you don't. And if you have it, it gives you options that you can use. In order to gain panache, your character must engage in appropriately daring actions. Once you have gained panache, you will have certain buffs to your combat abilities, most notably, at least to me, your incredible movement speed while you have panache. And then you also gain access to finishers, which are basically more powerful combat options, which when used cause you to lose panache. So again, you have a fun balance with the class where you have to ask yourself, do I want to use my panache for this powerful effect and lose these other nice bonuses that I've been carrying? And finally, we have the Witch. Now, one of the fun things about the Witch is in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, this is no longer just an arcane caster class. The Witch now has options for all 4 magical traditions in the game: Occult, Arcane, Divine, and Primal. So you can potentially play a Witch with a very wide variety of spells at your disposal. And one of the things I enjoy about the Witch is they have a build your own patron system built into the Witch. In Pathfinder 1st Edition, you would select a patron, it would give you a familiar, it would give you a list of abilities, and you'd go from there. Well, in 2nd Edition, your patron is slowly revealed as you learn lessons with your class feats. And every time you learn a lesson, it unlocks a unique witch's hex for you and tells you just a little bit more about what your patron is up to. Now, I'm just going to say up front, I really love this aspect of the Witch, and if I was playing under a game master that I trusted, I would really enjoy making it where I don't always know which lesson my patron is going to give me. I think it would be very fun and interesting to play a game where I don't necessarily know what my patron is up to, and I might be surprised by what my patron sends my way. It's a little bit more complex to deal with, but it's definitely a very intriguing storytelling option, and the Witch is definitely an interesting class. In addition to that, all of the core classes from the core rulebook receive new material as well. Most of the classes are going to get a new subclass of one kind or another, and then every class gains access to new class feats as well. Here's a quick list of some of the things you might see. The Alchemist is going to gain a new subclass called the Toxicologist Research Field, specializing in poisons. And they also gain a class feat that gives them access to the Healing Bomb additive. The Barbarian gains a new subclass as well, the Superstition Instinct, which focuses on battling against corruptive magic. The Barbarian also gains what is hands down my favorite class feat in this entire book, Friendly Toss. Yes, that's right, you can throw your Dwarven companion at your enemies and even let your Dwarven companion make a strike as a reaction at the end of that toss. Fastball Special is now an official build in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I love it. The Bard is also going to gain a new subclass, the Warrior Muse, and I really enjoy this. It kind of has like the classic Celtic warrior feel to it. Maybe I've been watching a little too much extra mythology, I don't know, but I definitely enjoy the Warrior Muse as an option. There's a wide variety of class feats as well. One of the standouts for the Bard is the Pied Piping class feat. Champions get a lot. They have added 3 new champion subclasses corresponding to the 3 evil alignments available in the game. In the core rulebook, you had a Lawful Good, Neutral Good, and Chaotic Good champion. Well, now you have a Lawful Evil, Neutral Evil, and Chaotic Evil champion. The Tyrant, Desecrator, and Anti-Paladin, respectively. I do enjoy Paizo's take on the evil version of champions, although, quick note Paizo, I am a little disappointed that you stuck with Anti-Paladin. That name has been goofy since D&D 3.0. Why did you keep it? Other than that, I enjoy the Evil Champions. It's a lot of fun. They also have a new class feat called Pale Rider. That's beautiful. But there are a lot of new options for champions. They've really opened that class up quite a bit. The Cleric class does not gain any new subclasses, but it gains a wide variety of new class feats. There are a lot of new meta magic feats available for the Cleric class, and there's also a class feat that I really like for Clerics called Surging Focus. I think it's a very nice addition to the class and offers some interesting role-playing opportunities. The Druid is another class that doesn't get a new subclass, but again, a ton of class feats. All of your casters are going to get a nice selection of meta magic feat options, but for the Druid class, I really enjoy some of the, I guess you would call them passive buff feats. Druids get a lot of abilities to basically just protect their allies from the environment around them. A couple of good examples include Wandering Oasis and Primal Aegis. The Fighter class didn't have subclasses to begin with, so there's no subclasses here, but there are a ton of fighter feats available. There's a lot of options to choose from. One of the interesting themes in this book is there are a lot of classes that have thrown weapon options that are now being built into the game. It's fun to see that as kind of a side choice you can make for different characters. Fighters get a couple of interesting options such as Rebounding Toss and Ricochet Stance. However, my favorite fighter feat has to be Smash from the Air, which can let you cut spells out of the air as they fly towards you. That is a beautiful fantasy trope, and I love seeing it included here. The Monk also gets a ton of class feats, and honestly, I think the Monk may get the most class feats of any of the existing classes. They get a lot of options here. The Monk doesn't have official subclasses, but if you remember from the core rulebook, they do a lot with different stances as options for monks, and they introduce a lot of new stances here, including things like the Stumbling Stance, or Drunken Boxing by another name. However, one of my favorite options for the Monk is a new class feat called 1-Inch Punch. It is a potentially devastating maneuver that can use 2 or 3 actions on your round, and I think it's a very fun inclusion in this book. For the Ranger, they really focused in on adding spellcasting options to the Ranger. In the core rulebook, Rangers didn't have any spellcasting at all, but Paizo heard that there was some demand for spellcasting as a Ranger option, and so they have added a new type of focus spell to the Rangers called Warden Spells. Rangers are not going to be full casters like your other casting classes, but similar to the Monk or the Champion, they now have focus spell options such as Gravity Bow or Heal Companion that you can select to give your Ranger a few magical abilities in the game. Rogue got a lot in this book. I'm just going to go ahead and say Rogue may have stolen some of the best material in the Advanced Player's Guide. They're going to get 2 new subclasses, the Mastermind, which is nice, and the Eldritch Trickster. I just want to pause right here and say that the Eldritch Trickster is a subclass done perfect. I love the Eldritch Trickster. Note that it's not the Arcane Trickster like previous editions. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the Eldritch Trickster Rogue can potentially access any of the 4 magical traditions, and I think this is a beautiful, beautiful addition to the game. The Sorcerer is also going to get a lot of fun options in this book. They're going to get 4 new bloodlines. The Genie bloodline is an arcane bloodline with 5 subclass options. The Nymph bloodline is a primal bloodline. The Psychopomp is the new divine bloodline for sorcerers. And the Shadow bloodline is the new occult bloodline that a sorcerer can select. Sorcerers are also going to get a bunch of new class feats. And I think my favorite has to be the Ancestral Blood Magic class feat. I thought that was a very fun choice. Last but not least is the Wizard. Wizards do get a new subclass option. They get the Staff Nexus Arcane Thesis, which allows you to really focus in on your wizard staff as a magical item and a source of power for your character. Wizards also get a lot of new class feats, especially new meta magic options like other casters, but I think my favorite new wizard class feat has to be Call Bonded Item. Whew! Okay, so that was a lot of stuff about classes. What do I think about this chapter? Paizo, good job. Overall, I have to give this chapter a solid A. Paizo, you brought a lot of great material here. There is a lot to like about this chapter. All 4 of your new core classes are definitely interesting. They bring some unique and exciting gameplay elements. Of the 4 new classes, I honestly had a hard time deciding between the Witch and the Oracle as to which of those classes was my favorite. The build your own patron aspect of the Witch is extremely engaging. There are some fantastic storytelling options there. But the new Oracle curses are also extremely well done. I went back and forth for a very long time trying to decide, is Oracle or Witch my favorite of the 2 new classes? And I think narrowly I'm going to give it to the Oracle, because right now the Oracle just has more options. But the Witch is very good, and I think as they expand on the Witch class in future supplements, that is also going to be an extremely compelling class. So my favorite right now, the Oracle, is the best new class that has been added to the game. The decision to directly tie your curse to your divine mystery has created some fantastic mechanical and storytelling opportunities. I love the Oracle class. It is extremely well done. As for the existing classes, Paizo did a really good job of offering new and interesting material to every single class. Honestly, every class feels like it got something worthwhile from this book. I will say that I am slightly disappointed with the Cleric, as I feel that there was definitely a lot of room that they could have developed the Cleric class, but the Cleric did get a lot of material in Lost Omens, Gods, and Magic, so that may be why they didn't offer a lot here. Also, if I have to nitpick the classes section, I am going to say this. Where are my neutral champions at? We had the good champions, you gave us the evil champions, but you left the neutral champions out. Now, I realize neutral champions are a little bit harder to write, but a lawful neutral champion is definitely a concept that I feel would be appropriate to the game, and I think true neutral and chaotic neutral also have some interesting room that you could play with. So Paizo, I am a little disappointed that you only gave champions here. It was probably a space thing, but I still miss it. Much like some of the ancestries in the previous chapter feeling just not quite there, the champion class also feels like you didn't quite finish it out because those 3 neutral alignments were not included in this book. Other than that, wow, just wow, this book is well done. One of the things that I want to note is they don't just copy and paste stuff from class to class. When you have areas where you would expect there to be overlap between 2 casting classes or 2 martial classes, there are similarities, but they took the time to make clear differences between the classes. For example, every magical class got new meta magic feats as class feat options. And every class has at least 1 or 2 unique meta magic feat options. They didn't just carbon copy the meta magic feats from one class to the next. They gave you interesting choices to reflect the differences between different types of casters. I love that. Paizo, you didn't just slap material on the page, but you took the time to think, how can we distinguish these classes from each other? And bravo, well done. This chapter gets a solid A. Everything in here is definitely high quality, and I think a lot of people are going to be clamoring to include the material from this chapter in their games. This is definitely good material. But there's a chapter that's better. Let's talk about Chapter 3, Archetypes. So Chapter 3 is the standout chapter in this book for me. I feel like most people who pick up the Advanced Player's Guide are probably going for Chapter 2, the class chapter, but for me, Chapter 3, the Archetypes chapter, this is where Paizo brought their best to the table. Well, let me get this out of the way. I'm giving this chapter an A+. Just go ahead and throw it up on the screen. I love this material. I have said in previous videos that the archetype system that was introduced in Pathfinder 2nd Edition as their take on multiclassing is easily one of the most mechanically interesting and just solid additions to the game. The archetype system was amazing. But in the core rulebook, the archetype system was specifically multiclassing. That's what it was. You didn't get anything else from archetypes. And in the Lost Omen series, we've gotten a few organization-themed archetypes, so they've expanded on archetypes a little, but Paizo kicked down the door on archetypes with this book. They included over 40 new archetypes in the Advanced Player's Guide. Not even making that up. They went the distance on archetypes. They had this new concept for the game that showed some promise in the core rulebook, while now they're showing its power. If you want to see what archetypes can do in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you need the Advanced Player's Guide because they have truly shown a wide variety of options here. First up, they offer some multi-classing archetypes. They give you the multi-class options for Investigator, Swashbuckler, Oracle, and Witch. You would expect those four. Then they take some classic Pathfinder 1st Edition classes and turn them into archetypes as well. For example, you now have the Cavalier and the Vigilante as two archetypes that you can take. By the way, quick aside, Game Mastery Guide for Pathfinder 2nd Edition gave us a free archetype system, and I just really want to run a game where all of my players have the free archetype Vigilante option, and basically run the medieval fantasy version of the Justice League. Okay, back on topic. They also do a number of, I guess you would describe them as combat option archetypes. Things like the Bastion and the Sentinel. They focus on using shields or heavy armor. You have a number of different archetypes that are all principled around if you want to take a particular class and specialize them in a particular type of combat, there is now an archetype that can do that for you. By the way, one of the things I really love about these combat-oriented archetypes is frequently what they do is they pull class feats that are appropriate to that style of combat and make them available through the archetype. So, for example, if you want to play an archer, some of the archery class feats that have been associated with the ranger and the fighter are now available through the archer archetype, meaning that other classes can gain access to those abilities, albeit at a slightly slower rate. In keeping with the beautiful work they did with the rogue in the previous chapter, one of my favorite archetypes is the Eldritch Archer. Yeah, that's right, it's not the Arcane Archer anymore. They're not limiting it to one magical tradition. Now, you have all four magical traditions as an option if you want to play the Magic Archer. However, far and away, one of the most interesting things that they did in this chapter is a selection of archetypes that I have to call skill-focused archetypes. A couple of good examples are the Acrobat, the Dandy, and the Linguist. Skill-focused archetypes start out like normal archetypes. You take a archetype dedication feat as one of your class feats to gain access to the archetypes such as Acrobat, Dandy, or Linguist. But then when you get into the archetype, they don't just limit you to class feat replacements. Many of the archetypes actually have skill feat replacements as well. Essentially, if you move into this particular archetype, you gain access to unique skill feats. And I don't know why I didn't think of this myself, but it is a very natural development for Pathfinder 2nd Edition and their archetype system, and it just opens up so many possibilities for the game. Now, I will admit, I'm one of those obsessive players who has to be able to speak every language in the game when I create a character because I want to know what that weird book says. So maybe I'm a little biased on how much I love The Linguist, but I have to say, they found a very interesting and unique mechanical space for the archetype system, and it's good. The archetype chapter is amazing. You may come for the classes, but I promise you the options that are available in the archetype section are amazing. Do not overlook this part of the Advanced Player's Guide. They brought some fantastic material to this game. So now we come to Chapter 4, which is going to be the Feats chapter. And at this point, we've kind of passed the core of the material in the Advanced Player's Guide. The first 3 chapters, Ancestries and Backgrounds, Classes, and Archetypes, those are very meaty and intense chapters. There's a lot of material in those. And the later chapters are going to be thinner. They're not going to have quite as much information as the first 3 chapters, but I still want to take a look at them because they do impact the game, and I do think they are worth considering. So the Feats chapter is basically going to offer us 13 new general feats and 39 new skill feats that you can take as your character progresses through the game. Overall, I would like to give this section an A. I will say, this is probably going to be an underappreciated chapter compared to everything else in the Advanced Player's Guide, but I do think this is a good inclusion in the Advanced Player's Guide, and I do think it is beneficial to Pathfinder 2nd Edition as a whole. Now, I am a forever DM. Okay, not forever DM, but I primarily serve as the DM for my gaming groups. I very rarely sit on the player side of the table, meaning that most of my developing of player characters is just me theory crafting for fun, but I would be guilty of theory crafting quite a bit. And one of the things that I've noticed with Pathfinder 2nd Edition is the skill feats section, and especially the general feats section of character creation, is one of the narrowest sections of play. I am really happy that Paizo took the time to expand these options and expand these sections. General feats and skill feats may be overlooked compared to class feats and some of the more powerful options that you normally get to take, but it is something to consider, and it is nice to have additional variety in these areas. General feats especially needed a breath of fresh air, and this chapter definitely gave us some nice options. One of my favorite set of options in the general feats section starts with the feat Prescient Planner. Have you ever been on an adventure and encountered a situation and said, man, I really wish we had a... right now? Well, if you have the Prescient Planner feat, when that happens, you can mark a little gold off your character sheet, pull out your backpack, and pull that exact item out. Now, it's non-magical items only at first. Later you can add magical consumable items to this particular ability, but it's kind of fun to just have a blank piece of gear that you can write in when you need it. However, my favorite general feat, and definitely the most powerful general feat offered in the book, if you're playing a class that can get to Legendary Perception, you definitely want to take the True Perception feat, which allows you to walk around with the True Seeing spell active at all times. Ranger just became a very compelling class for me. As I said, there are also 39 new skill feats. We can't possibly cover every single option here, but I will say Paizo took the time to make sure that every skill in the game did get at least one new feat option, and there are definitely some interesting choices that you can take. If you want your group to have its own secret code, you can use the doublespeak skill feat to allow your party to communicate secretly with one another, even in the middle of a crowd, and if people can't beat your deception DC, your messages go completely undetected. There's also a fun new feat called Consult the Spirits, which can potentially allow any character to spend some time talking to local spirits, corresponding to different magical traditions, and potentially gaining useful information that the party might be able to use. However, if there is a skill feat that definitely takes the cake for me with this chapter, it is the Disturbing Knowledge skill feat. This is a skill feat that gives you access to a special action where you deliberately just try to creep people out with the weird things that you know. By the way, all of my friends in real life have access to this skill feat. I'm pretty sure. I love that feat. It is hilarious. It's also really hilarious if you critically fail when you use it. But let me just say, this is a simple chapter, but it is a welcome chapter. The feats chapter adds a lot of variety to the skill feat and general feat choices that player characters get to make, and it may get overlooked by some people, but I have to give this chapter an A. I am very glad this material is here. Up next is Chapter 5, which is the Spells chapter, and I'll go ahead and throw out my grade for this chapter as well. This is another A chapter. More spells is always a good thing. Everybody likes options, and giving casters more options is a welcome addition to the game. If my count is correct, there are 58 new standard spells offered in this chapter, 82 new focus spells in this chapter, and 13 new ritual spells in this chapter. They cover a lot of ground, and you've got a lot of variety. Again, it would be very difficult to hit all of the spells that are available, but casters of every flavor are going to appreciate the options that are presented here. Real quick, I'll give you 3 of my favorites. Of the standard spells that are included in this book, well, I don't know if it's a favorite, but I will say, if you're watching this video, please never tell my wife that the blister spell is now an option in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. She does not need to find that spell, because I do not need to try to process the emotional and moral impact of using that spell on an enemy. Flavor win, but that spell got me. As for the new focus spells, there are quite a few options here, but my favorite is a throwback to an old fantasy classic. The Sorcerer Nymph Bloodline gains the Blinding Beauty focus spell, and it is great to see that throwback to classic gaming included in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So Paizo, thank you for including that. However, the gem of the spells chapter, at least for me, is one of the new ritual spells. Well, actually, I guess I should say, it's not a new spell, but it is new as a ritual spell. That is Word of Recall. You have probably seen this spell in old editions of the game, allowing you to set a location and teleport back to that location instantly whenever you need to. Well, now, they've opened up Word of Recall to anyone who can do ritual magic. And my favorite thing, it's a secret check. You don't know how the ritual went, and you don't find out until you try to use that recall ability. They added a critical fail to the Word of Recall ritual. Oh my goodness, as a storyteller, this makes me so happy. I may never see it in a game, but I can imagine. Overall, this is a simple chapter, but it's a needed chapter. More spells, more options. Caster characters are going to love it. Wide variety of new focus spells. Thank you, Paizo. Solid A for the spells chapter. Definitely a worthy inclusion in this book. Lastly, we have the items chapter in the Advanced Player's Guide, and this is one of the smallest chapters in the game, but I need my notes because there's a lot of stuff I get to throw at you. The items chapter is going to include 14 new weapons and pieces of adventuring gear, along with class-specific adventuring kits for the new 4 base classes. It offers 18 new alchemical items. It offers 4 new snares. It offers 21 new consumable items. And finally, it gives you 32 new permanent magical items. And included in this chapter is a set of treasure tables that lists all of the new items in the game. Now let me go ahead and say, this is probably the weakest chapter of the Advanced Player's Guide. I give this chapter a B+. There is some fun material in here, especially if you're the Alchemist. I think Alchemist will probably come to this chapter a lot because there are some good options in there. Sovereign glue. But other players may never even bother to open this chapter. It kind of feels like a grab bag of ideas that some people are going to like and many people are going to not need. So I don't know that this chapter is going to get the most use at your gaming table, but I do appreciate that the options are here. Among the new weapons, you have things like the sword cane, which is a classic weapon that I love. And I already mentioned that the Alchemist has access to Sovereign Glue. Yes, that's right, Sovereign Glue is no longer a magical item, it is an alchemical item, and that is a perfect flavor win. Good job, Paizo. I love that change. They also kindly included Universal Solvent because, yes, we definitely needed it. I can't begin to go through all of the consumable items and other things like that that are included in this, but among the permanent magical items, a couple of my favorites are the Medusa's Scream Shield and the Winged Rune for your armor. There are definitely some enjoyable things that you can pick up in this chapter. So again, it's a little bit of a grab bag, but some characters are definitely going to find things that they like here. I do have a few nitpicks on this chapter. Number one, the mundane gear, the weapon and adventuring gear section is painfully short. I kind of wish they had brought a little bit more to the table. I wish they had included a few more options. I appreciate the new magical gear, but I feel like the mundane gear is the stuff that is more likely to see actual play, and so it's a little bit disappointing that the mundane gear is limited here. Another nitpick on this chapter is the permanent magical items section is not sorted by item type. In the core rulebook, wands and staves and runes and different things like that all had their own distinct sections, but in the Advanced Player's Guide, permanent magical items all just kind of get thrown in one section together, and it can be a little bit hard to find the item that you're looking for. I don't know why they went away from the organization system that they used in the core rulebook. I realize there aren't necessarily a lot of each type of item, but it still would have been nice and it would have made things easier to find. Other than that, I can say that this is still a fun and useful section. There are things that some characters are going to enjoy. It might not see the most play, but I do think it will see some play at your tables, so the item section is still a nice addition to the game. Not as strong as the other chapters. I give it a B+, but you'll probably still find things that you like. Whew. Wow, that was a review. 6 chapters. Paizo, you crammed so much information into such a tiny book. When I look at this book, I have a hard time believing that there are 4 brand new classes, that there are expansions for all 12 of the core classes, and 42 archetypes, and that's only 2 chapters of what's to be found in this book. Paizo brought their A game with this book. There is a ton of fantastic information, and I definitely think that the Advanced Player's Guide for 2nd edition shows how you can build high quality content on top of the core framework that the Pathfinder 2nd edition core rulebook established. So, this is a book I can highly recommend. I really enjoy this book. I'm excited by a ton of the options. There are nitpicks here and there. A big one that stands out for me is the lack of the neutral alignment champions. Paizo, if this is a core rulebook for a game, why did you leave a core character concept out of the book? There are nitpicks, there are problems with this product, but those problems are easily outshone by the incredible quality of what is here. This is a book I can strongly recommend. It's a book that I think is going to see a ton of play at my tables, and it is something I am very, very excited to have added to my collection. I know that this was a huge review, and if I'm being honest, I feel like I've only scratched the surface of what's available. I'm actually planning a few videos down the road that are going to deep dive into some of the other content in this book to maybe give you a little bit more of an in-depth look at what is available. One of the first videos, I'm going to be redoing my class ranking video here soon, and I'm going to be including the 4 new classes, and we're going to talk about how the classes stack up against one another. And I've got some other video concepts I'm wrestling with as well that may allow us to explore this book in more detail, but I have to say, Paizo did a fantastic job, and there is a lot that this book has to offer. I strongly recommend check it out for yourself, and if you're going to be playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition, this may be a book that will be very welcome at your table. Thank you again for joining me. I just want to give you one more reminder. If you've stuck with me this long, make sure to head over to RPG Superstar, check out all of the entries, and if you're feeling generous, vote for the Salt Stalker that I submitted to the competition, but definitely take some time to vote for the people who did hard work offering up creatures for that competition. I'm very excited to be part of it, and I'm excited to see how everything plays out. Thank you again for joining me, and have a wonderful day.